Libya. You see dead bodies on the highways, people got arrested every day, tortures. Tripoli is worst because you have to run away from the police, the civilians, and the rebels. They used to attack black people in their compounds, in their houses, anytime. Finally, we got caught by the soldiers. They took us to prison. I was in the prison for 3 months. Yeah, the Libyan authorities, the Libyan police, yeah, they were maltreating us, torturing, beating.
Yeah, sure. It's on the UN website.
All right. Good afternoon. We will have, after we're done here, we will have Brendan who will brief for the PGA, and then we will have our guest, Mr. Villalpando, who will brief on the treaty event going on. As you saw this morning, we issued a statement in which the Secretary General condemned the launch of yet another ballistic missile launch by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This manifest violation of Security Council resolutions comes just days after the DPRK concluded its sixth nuclear test. The Secretary General calls on the DPRK leadership to cease further testing, comply with the relevant Security Council resolutions, and allow space to explore the resumption of sincere dialogue on denuclearization. The Secretary General will be discussing the situation on the Korean Peninsula with all concerned parties on the margins of the upcoming high-level week of the General Assembly. And I think, as you're aware, there is a consultation scheduled for the Security Council on the DPRK at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Turning to Myanmar, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the number of Rohingya refugees who have fled across the border from Bangladesh to Myanmar has now climbed to 391,000. Aid workers continue to supply food, plastic sheets, water, and other supplies. The first 15 of the 35 scheduled trucks of aid provided by the UN Refugee Agency arrived in Cox's Bazar today, while other agencies are airlifting their supplies into Bangladesh. The World Health Organization is working with the Bangladeshi government and other organizations to provide health care. Tomorrow, a WHO-backed vaccination campaign against measles and polio will be launched to reach 150,000 children between the ages of 6 months and 15 years who have newly arrived in Bangladesh. WHO is also helping the government send in medical teams to the new refugee settlements and will distribute emergency medical kits, water purification tablets, and cholera kits in the coming days. Ali al-Zatari, the humanitarian coordinator for Syria, confirmed that the UN supplies arrived in Deir ez-Zor city yesterday, where 93,500 people are in urgent need of assistance. The UN supplies delivered by the Syrian Arab Red Crescent by road consisted of life-saving items such as hygiene kits, solar lamps, plastic sheeting, and kitchen sets for about 15,000 families. At the same time, fighting and military operations in Deir ez-Zor Governorate in the recent days have continued to put civilians in the line of fire and have reportedly resulted in the civilian deaths and damage to civilian infrastructure. The UN is particularly concerned about reports from yesterday that airstrikes on an informal settlement hosting internally displaced people in Jadid Edekat town, 20 kilometers south of Deir ez-Zor, resulted in the deaths of 120 people, including 100 children. In order to support the massive needs of people in the city, Mr. al-Zaatari and heads of UN agencies want to visit Deir ez-Zor immediately to meet with the governor and local departments to review the needs as soon as the situation on the ground permits it. And our humanitarian colleagues tell us that flooding across Niger has now impacted over 200,000 people and killed 54, causing damage in all regions of Niger. The floods have destroyed over 11,000 houses and 12,000 hectares of crops and killed 16,000 heads of cattle. Relief efforts are underway. Humanitarian partners continue to mobilize resources. UNICEF and the International Organization for Migration have supported at least 22,000 people with non-food items and shelter. And in Nigeria, the Office of the Special Representative of the Children in Armed Conflict and UNICEF today welcomed the signing by the Civilian Joint Task Force of an action plan to end the recruitment and use of children. The Civilian Joint Task Force was formed in 2013 to support the Nigerian security forces in the fight against Boko Haram in the northeast of the country. It was listed last year in the annexes of the Secretary General's annual report for children in armed conflict for the recruitment and use of children. With the signature of this action plan, the Civilian Joint Task Force commits to put in place a number of measures to end and prevent child recruitment and use, including in identifying and releasing all children within the group's ranks and instructing its members not to recruit or use children in the future. And today, the annual State of Food Insecurity in the World report was released in Rome. After years of progress, the report finds that the number of hungry people around the world is on the rise. This signals a reversal of trends and could undermine efforts at reaching zero hunger by 2030. In 2016, the number of chronically undernourished people is estimated to have increased up to 815 million people, up from 777 million in 2015. There are also 155 million children under the age of 5 who suffer from stunted growth and are too small for their age. These worsening figures are also directly linked to the increase in conflicts around the world and to places where there is conflict and floods and droughts. Food insecurity has worsened, especially in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Western Asia. The report is prepared by the World Food Program, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the UNICEF, and the World Health Organization, and it's available online. And as an example of what we've just talked about, UNICEF says today an additional 37,000 children across Kenya are below the threshold of acute malnutrition following the failure of March-June rains. Almost 370,000 children across the country now require treatment for acute malnutrition. And our colleagues at the UN Environment Program are launching today a campaign to mark the 30th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol and its success in protecting the Earth against the ozone depletion and mitigating climate change. The campaign Ozone Heroes was created in partnership with Marvel Comics and seeks to raise awareness at how people can work together to tackle climate change and the depletion of the ozone layer. The campaign includes an online quiz with characters from Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, where users can discover their superpower and learn about these issues. ozoneheroes.org. If you're bored during this briefing, you can go online and take the quiz. In addition to Brendan and Mr. Villalpando from the treaty section, at 4 p.m. there'll be a press conference by Jeffrey Onyema, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. Klein.
Yes, on Wednesday, the Secretary General emphasized the importance of beefing up and supporting the Lebanese army in helping to stabilize the country. But he didn't address the question at the time about the role of Hezbollah, given their influence in the government and so forth. So I'd like to know whether you could comment on whether the Secretary General believes that Hezbollah is playing a constructive role or a destructive role in Lebanon.
I think issues related to armed groups in southern Lebanon are reported by the UN on a regular basis through its reports to Security Council. Hezbollah is also a member of the Lebanese government. The Secretary General believes that it is important for Lebanon to have strong institutions and a strong national army that can be present throughout the country.
But given the reported buildup of rockets in southern Lebanon by Hezbollah and its destabilizing activities in Lebanon and Syria, and you're aware of what Ambassador Nikki Haley has said specifically about Hezbollah, I just want to try to get some clarity on where the Secretary General stands in relation to Hezbollah's activities.
As I said, I would refer you to the various reports that we've issued on the situation in Lebanon, specifically in southern Lebanon. And for the Secretary General, as I said, he believes that Lebanon needs strong state institutions, and that all those political parties who are part of the government should support those institutions, including the National Army. Abdelhamid.
Thank you.
Too slow.
The Israeli daily Haaretz published on 13th of this month the full text of the platform of the National Union Party in Israel, adopting the transfer as an official policy. The party received a congratulation letter from the Prime Minister in congratulating them for this clarity and for this policy. Is there any comment on this dangerous development?
We're not going to comment. So I haven't seen the report. I'm not going to comment on the platforms of various parties in various governments. For the Secretary General, the goal is clear. It's a two-state solution that needs to be agreed upon, achieved through direct negotiations between the parties. I mean, I think his position is clear, and his position is an answer to any question. And of course, we would stand against any forced transfer of people wherever they are throughout the world. Mr. Avni.
On Hezbollah, the question that was asked, the Security Council resolutions say that there should be no armed militias other than the Lebanese army. Hezbollah is not dividing itself between the political and the military. So isn't there a self-contradictory in what you're saying, that on the one hand there needs to be, or the Security Council saying that there needs to be disarming of all militias except for the army, and on the other hand, the same organization that has a militia being a member of the government, and you want them to cooperate?
I stand by what I said. I don't think I'm capable of self-contradicting myself. Matthew.
Wait, sorry, I don't understand the answer.
The answer is we report on a regular basis on the situation in southern Lebanon and what UNIFIL observes. The Secretary General, in his letter to the Security Council, said he was looking at strengthening and on the reporting and the way UNIFIL does its work. Our position is that Lebanon needs a strong national institutions, including a strong national army that has the ability to project itself throughout the country.
The army answers to a government that has a majority of the same party that has militia. That
is a valid observation. Oleg.
Thank you, Stefan. I have a question on the UN reform meeting, but before that, do you have anything to say on the attack in London today?
Yes. Sorry. So on what was the question on the reform?
Since the Secretary General is going to be one of the only speakers at the event, what will be his message to the people attending it? And since he's taking part in it, does it mean that he fully supports all the ideas the U.S. has about the UN reform, which is in the declaration? Thank you.
The reform process of the United Nations is ultimately in the hands of the member states. The Secretary General has presented his various reform streams, whether it's on to various levels, whether it's on peacekeeping, political issues, development, management. It is critical for the Secretary General to engage in a dialogue and address all those member states who are also interested in reform. Ultimately, the reforms that he's putting forward will have to be approved by the 193 member states. The United States, given its size of its financial contributions, is obviously a critical partner in that reform. All member states are important partners, but and it's important that the Secretary General engage with the United States, and he looks forward to attending the meeting. He is not. The Secretary General himself is not a member state. He doesn't have to sign on to whatever declaration. This is a political declaration. You'd have to obviously ask the United States for more information on as they are running the meeting. But Secretary General is very happy to be in attendance in the meeting and will be delighted to further outline his views on reform. Matthew. Oh, sorry, on London. We're obviously following and tracking the developments in London this morning, the attack which left many people injured. We condemn the attack, and we wish a speedy recovery to those who were injured. The UN stands in solidarity with the people and government of the United Kingdom, and we hope the perpetrator will be quickly brought to justice. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I asked you a couple days ago about Burundi, about the abduction of a major opposition leader, and also whether Mr. Kafando would be here. I guess it now seems that he will be here.
Mr. Kafando will be here.
Okay, can you say what he'll be doing, and also whether he or you have become aware of this very high profile?
I haven't
abduction?
gotten any more updates on that abduction. I have no doubt that he's aware, and I assume he will be having a number of bilateral meetings with delegations here, as most of the envoys will do. It's only natural for them to come here and use this opportunity to meet with various stakeholders.
But I guess, I mean, overall, what can you explain, if you look at the list or what seems to be the emerging list of country-specific meetings that the Secretary General is organizing and those that are not? For example, Yemen, which is one of the 4 listed famines.
Why
wasn't a meeting organized
the meetings,
on Yemen?
Most of the country-specific meetings, I will be struck down if I'm wrong, are not organized by the Secretary General himself. A lot of them are groups of countries that come together and want to discuss a specific issue. The fact that there is no meeting on a specific country doesn't take away from the importance of dealing with the situation in that country, or whether it's a humanitarian crisis, a political crisis, or complex crisis involving both. There will be many issues being dealt with in bilateral meetings with the Secretary General. Other senior UN officials will have those meetings. So I don't think the list of country-specific meetings is a tell-all barometer of what crisis is more important than another.
But I guess just on these 2 countries, if in terms of the Secretary General sort of either showing leadership or hitting them where they ain't, if in the case of Burundi and Yemen, the penholders in the Council, let's take Yemen, where the UK is actually selling weapons to one of the sides in the conflict, the fact that the countries concerned, quote unquote, don't want to organize a meeting may not really serve the people of Yemen very well.
I think the efforts of the envoys, who will, I think most of them will be here, will continue in that aim. Yes, ma'am.
What is the order of the speakers in the U.S. reform meeting on Monday, do you know? And also, if you have the number of attendants of all countries at the UNGA, the number of representatives?
We have the speakers list for the General Assembly, session, which is available.
How many countries attending in general?
In general, we can give you those. I don't have the numbers of heads of states with me, but we have those statistics available, and maybe Brendan even has them in his head. The speakers, I think my understanding is that Ambassador Haley will open the meeting, and I think the Secretary General will speak, the President of the United States will speak, and then Ambassador Haley will close the meeting. That's my understanding, but again, you should check with the U.S. mission, as they are the sponsors of this meeting. I think it will be, my understanding is that it will be webcast. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, there's a couple of things that I'd ask you that I didn't hear you get back on. One was Togo, where you'd said you were going to check the quotes of Mr. Chambas, whether he in fact gave his blessing. Now that there's a big, actually the parliamentary thing that you referred to, the opposition has said that it's much less than what was promised. The protests are getting larger. Did Mr. Chambas say the things that Reuters quoted him as saying?
My understanding is that he said what he was quoted as saying.
Okay, so is it the Secretary General's view that it's legitimate for a family whose father and son have now been in power for 50 years to remain in power through 2030? Is that the 2030?
I don't think that's the Secretary General's view is that people should be able to choose their leaders.
And on Ethiopia, you'd said...
I didn't get anything on Ethiopia. Why don't we have Brendan come up, and then we'll go to our guest.
Are you doing briefings next week?
I'm doing briefings Monday. We'll suspend Tuesday and Wednesday because there's a lot of stuff going on, and then we'll resume Wednesday, and I think Gordon Brown will also be here on Wednesday.
And if questions are submitted to you,
we will do our best.
Good afternoon. Early this morning, the President of the General Assembly tweeted the following about today's explosion on the London Underground. He said, quote, "Train passengers shouldn't be targets. The UN stands united against terrorism." He also tweeted a condemnation of the terrorist attack in southern Iraq, which has led to more than 80 deaths. You can follow his tweets at UN_PGA. Regarding the high-level meeting on Hurricane Irma, which I announced yesterday, expected speakers include the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, as well as the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General, UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner, and Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Mark Lowcock, and also Kristalina Georgieva of the World Bank. Again, the Hurricane Irma event will be held in the Trusteeship Council Chamber on Monday, September 18th, from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. We're still finalizing a media advisory with details on how to attend. We hope to be able to send that out later today. This morning, the President addressed the annual observance of the International Day of Peace in the Japanese Garden. Stressing his commitment to sustaining peace and preventing conflict, he said, quote, "Casting aside arms, even for one day, is a noble and valuable gesture, but it would be even better if those weapons had never been picked up in the first place." He added, "Peace cannot be measured in numbers of resolutions and high-level meetings. Peace is measured in the number of people who feel safe and secure, who are free to exercise their human rights, and who have hope for the future." The full statement is on our website, un.org/PGA. In terms of the President's meetings today, he's meeting this afternoon with UN Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support, Oscar Fernandez Taranco, to discuss peacebuilding matters. After that, he will have a meeting on Security Council reform with the Uniting for Consensus group. In that meeting will be representatives from Argentina, Canada, Colombia, Italy, Mexico, Pakistan, Republic of Korea, Spain, and Turkey. He will also meet with Sustainable Development Goals advocate Richard Curtis. And just now, as I was coming down, the General Assembly at its second plenary meeting approved its agenda for the 72nd session. The President chaired that meeting. There are 174 items on the agenda, and as part of today's meeting, the General Assembly plenary voted on whether to include in this session's agenda the item entitled "The Responsibility to Protect and the Prevention of Genocide, War Crimes, Ethnic Cleansing, and Crimes Against Humanity." By a vote of 113 in favor to 21 against, with 17 abstentions, the plenary decided to include the agenda item. That's all from me. Any questions? No question? Yes.
Will the Hurricane Irma meeting be open to the media?
Yes, that's the intention. Yes, we would love for the media to attend. So in our media advisory, we'll try to specify exactly what needs to be done for you to get there. Yes.
So my name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. So the nature-made disaster worth a high-level meeting, which is that rightfully so. But a human-made disaster doesn't worth a meeting like what's happening in Myanmar. Why the President of the General Assembly doesn't call for a high-level meeting to deal with the disaster or genocide or ethnic cleansing taking place in Myanmar?
Sure. Well, one thing that the President did say when he assumed his duties was that he didn't want to bring in a lot of other high-level meetings, precisely for the fact that the UN already has a very full agenda on its plate, and he didn't want to overburden smaller delegations. Now, you've definitely mentioned that there will be this meeting in conjunction with the Secretary General on Hurricane Irma, and that was simply because the President was very moved by the devastation that he was seeing, and the fact that after the hurricane passed, that there were still so many humanitarian needs that needed to be met. So that explains why this meeting was held. It doesn't preclude that other meetings would be held on other topics in the future. There is currently a very full agenda with high-level meetings, including on human trafficking and nuclear weapons that are going to be coming up within this month. But thank you for that comment.
But I'm sure he was moved also for what's happening in Myanmar, right?
Sure, and on Myanmar, he definitely has been monitoring the situation, and he definitely wants to see that the human tragedy that is happening there does not escalate at all. He has been in touch with the Secretary General about Myanmar, and he's following closely what the Security Council is doing as well. Yes, Matthew.
I don't know if you'll have an answer to it right now, but you seem, it's early days, pretty responsive. In the fourth committee, there's been a request made, I guess, now that in this new session by Morocco that Western Sahara be removed from the agenda of the fourth committee, the decolonization committee. And it's not clear to me what the process is. It seems like most of the times that things have been removed, it's because they actually became independent. Is there some? Can you find? I guess I'm just wondering. Maybe this is within your remit. What the process is, or what the precedents are to remove an item from the decolonization committee without it becoming independent. And so it's more of I'm not necessarily asking you to get into the legalities right now, but I would appreciate some. Maybe within your office.
Sure. Well, as I said earlier, the agenda for the General Assembly's 72nd session, which includes the fourth committee, that was adopted just moments ago as I was walking down. So, I mean, you should be able to see the list of the agenda items and what was allocated to the fourth committee. So I would check that before, okay. and then if you still have questions, I'd be happy to follow up.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Would you have any readout of the meeting that the PGA has this afternoon on Security Council reform?
Sure. Well, the topic will definitely be Security Council reform. That's why he's meeting with Uniting for Consensus. If there's anything more that I can say after the meeting, I'll definitely let you know. Yes, Aziz.
Thank you, Brandon. Just to follow up on Matthew's question. My understanding is that the Moroccan ambassador asked for the Western Sahara issue to be removed from the fourth committee because it is being treated by the Security Council. And I guess that he said that it's against the UN Charter that the situation there be treated within the General Assembly and the Security Council. Do you confirm that?
I would have to check on that. I would urge you to check with the Moroccan ambassador about his comments, and I can follow up on my side.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, my question is, do you confirm that the UN Charter says that if a situation is being treated by the UN Security Council, cannot be treated by the UN General Assembly?
Well, I would urge you to look at the Charter. I mean, the Security Council does have responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. That's very clear in the Charter. There have been ways in which the General Assembly has acted on these matters when the Security Council has been unable to act. And I would urge you to consult history and the UN Charter on that.
There's just on that, just finally, and maybe it's with your colleague Stefan here. There was a question of whether Mr. Kohler, the new personal representative on Western Sahara, will be around for the General Assembly week. So maybe either you or he can answer that.
Sure, that would be a question for the Secretariat. Yeah, Stefan could maybe follow up.
Wait, I don't understand your answer there.
About what the SG's personal envoy, about his whereabouts?
No. Yeah. about the General Assembly acting when the Security Council can act, but in this case, the Security Council is engaged with Western Sahara. So.
Sure. Let me look into the. I haven't been briefed on Western Sahara coming down today, so let me look into it.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
On another matter, do you have any numbers on the number of heads of states and heads of governments who will be attending the UNGA? Thank you.
Sure. The list keeps fluctuating, but the latest should be with the SG spokesperson's office. According to the latest list that I've seen, just going through the list and counting, I counted around 90 heads of state, but this is not a scientific method. I just counted through the list. But I would urge you to just take a look at the latest list that's in the spokesperson's office and do the count yourself. But in terms of heads of state and heads of government, we're definitely expecting over 100. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Right, we'll get Mr. Villalpando to brief you on the treaty section.
Great. Good afternoon again. We're delighted to be joined as usual every September by Santiago Villalpando, who is
in the Office of Legal Affairs. So, Santiago, all yours. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I'm, as usual, grateful for the opportunity to brief you once again on our annual treaty event. This will begin on Tuesday, September 19th, here at the United Nations headquarters in the margins of the general debate of the General Assembly. So as you may know, the treaty event was initiated by the Secretary General 17 years ago on the occasion of the Millennium Summit and has become a standard feature of the Leaders' Week of the General Assembly. The spirit of the treaty event is simple. The Secretary General invites high-level dignitaries to seize the opportunity of their presence in New York for the opening of the annual session of the General Assembly to join multilateral treaties. The treaty has been an undoubted success in promoting participation in the United Nations multilateral framework. Last year, we reached the landmark of 2,000 treaty actions achieved thanks to this initiative. The actual number is 2,046 by now. These actions, I should add, are remarkable not only in their number, but also in their significance. Major steps in multilateral cooperation have been achieved in the framework of the treaty event. Last year, a significant leap towards the entry into force of the Paris Agreement was achieved, for example, at a high-level ceremony that was held in the General Assembly Hall. We hope that this success will continue this year. Now, on the occasion of these briefings, I usually take the opportunity to draw your attention to the importance of multilateral treaties in the realization of the purposes of the Charter. Multilateral treaties are a key instrument for states members to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations, and achieve international cooperation. Throughout the history of the organization, hundreds of multilateral treaties have been adopted in all areas of international relations, from human rights, peaceful settlement of disputes, disarmament, or telecommunications, to trade, the protection of the environment, the fight against terrorism, or international criminal justice. The Secretary General is the depositary of nearly 600 of such multilateral treaties, and the discharge of his depository functions befall to my section. The depositary is, first of all, the custodian of the original of the treaty, and my job, therefore, includes the nerdy privilege of keeping the originals of the signed originals of treaties such as the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, or the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But the depository also plays a fundamental role in the operation of the treaty as the recipient of every signature and of every instrument of ratification, accession, reservations, objections, amendments, corrections, etc. This is what the treaty event is all about. Throughout next week, high government authorities will sign multilateral treaties deposited with the Secretary General or submit their instruments of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession to those treaties. We expect participation of several heads of state and government, and who will take action on treaties such as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Minamata Convention on Mercury, as well as the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I will refer to that in a minute. The last year has been eventful in this area, following the historic ceremonies of signature and ratification in April and September of last year. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change entered into force on November 4th of 2016. This is an astonishingly successful agreement. It has been signed by 195 states, nearly the entire international community, and already now, less than a year after its entry into force, it has 160 parties. But this is far from being the only significant progress achieved in environmental law. On August 16th, the Minamata Convention on Mercury also entered into force. This convention aims at protecting the human health and the environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. And on October 15th of last year, the Secretary General received in deposit the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, by which states agreed to cut the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, by more than 80% by 2030, in 30 years. Now, there have also been important developments in the area of disarmament. The Central African Convention on the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons entered into force on May the 8th. And, of course, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted by a conference convened by the General Assembly on July the 7th, and the Secretary General is the depository of that. Now, let me now turn specifically to this year's treaty event. The event will take place for 4 days next week, from Tuesday, September 19th, to Friday, September 22nd. The theme of this year's event is promoting multilateral treaties that safeguard humanity. And this is in line with core responsibility 2 of the Secretary General's report on, for the World Humanitarian Summit and the annexed agenda for humanity. The same call is also reflected in Secretary General Guterres' May 2017 report on the protection of civilians. One of the priorities of the Secretary General is to mobilize a global community of stakeholders, including member states, to enhance the protection of civilians and other protected persons in armed conflict. As part of this effort, he's urging all states to join those treaties that are most relevant to civilian protection in armed conflict. I should also point out that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which I mentioned earlier, will open for signature on September 20th. That's next Wednesday. On this occasion, a high-level signature ceremony is convened by the Secretary General in the Trusteeship Council chamber. The ceremony will start at 8 a.m. with statements by the Secretary General himself, the President of the General Assembly, the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as representatives of negotiating states and civil society. Immediately after those statements, dignitaries will be invited to sign the treaty. And I can already confirm that we have received numerous confirmations for participation in this event, and that we expect several heads of state and government to sign the treaty in the course of the ceremony. Before concluding, let me say a few words about the logistics of the treaty event. The event will take place once again in its usual location at the General Assembly building in the Kuwaiti boat area. That's near the entrance of the building. The event consists of a series of short ceremonies in which dignitaries sign one or more treaties or deposit instruments of ratification, accession, etc. These ceremonies are open to United Nations accredited press and provide an opportunity for press coverage and photos. As I mentioned, many states have already confirmed their intention to take action during this year's event, and several of them will be represented at the highest level. For information about this year's event, I invite you to consult our website, treaties.un.org, which contains also information, comprehensive information on the status of all multilateral treaties deposited with the Secretary General, as well as activities of the treaty section. We encourage states to take part in this year's treaty event, as well as in all our future events. All governments intending to participate in the event are kindly requested to contact my section for any additional information they may require. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm available, of course, to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Santiago. Yes, Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic Daily. First, I want to ask you about the status of the State Observer State of Palestine. Will it be taking part in the ceremony on Wednesday? And the second, the State of Palestine tried to join the World Tourism Organization. And as far as I know, you may correct me, that it was not accepted or denied or blocked or something happened. If you are aware of the situation, so please explain it to me. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. With regard to the first question about the State of Palestine's participation to the ceremony, we don't have yet received any confirmation of that, but you should know that our list is the list of all states that have fulfilled all the legal requirements for this. We are still, this is a list that is continuing to increase in these days. With regard to the United Nations World Trade Organization, I don't have tourism organization. I don't have any specific information about that.
I saw some press reports. It's a specialized agency, so it's up to them to decide on their membership. Yes.
Hi, I'm Alex Hassanein from the Tokyo Shimbun, a Japanese newspaper. Regarding the nuclear weapons ban treaty signing event, I wanted to know how many member states have confirmed they will sign the treaty that morning, and has it been decided who will sign first? And since member states won't be making remarks during the event, do you expect there will be a stakeout or anything at that evening?
All right, so about how many states have confirmed? At this stage, I have 38 states having confirmed participation in the ceremony, plus another number of states that are signing the treaty but not at the joint ceremony, maybe even including in the course of the same day. But as I mentioned before, this list is increasing daily. It's increasing right now. We continue to receive calls, intentions, etc. And my list only confirms those that have confirmed name, title of the dignitary and provided all the legal documentation. So this may increase later on. About who would sign first, we will follow a protocol order, heads of state first, heads of government, ministers for foreign affairs, and then other authorities. So it's on a strictly protocol order. About the other element, I'm not aware of.
You can check with Malu on that. Oleg?
Yes, a quick follow-up. I'm Oleg Zelenin with TASS News Agency. How many heads of states do you expect at the signing event on Wednesday? And could you name at least some of them?
For the joint ceremony, I have at this stage around 8. There's a few others that will be coming later on in the day and the day after. The precise names will depend, of course, on the agendas of heads of state. With heads of state, it may happen that they change, but I have countries such as Brazil, Chile, Madagascar, Palau, South Africa, among others.
Thanks. Yep. You just have to press it on. There's a button on the microphone.
On the Paris Agreement, what is the status of the United States of America? Are they still on the treaty, or did they withdraw? And if so, what's the formal procedure for a member state to withdraw from that agreement?
I will answer that last question first, which is that Article 28 of the Paris Agreement has a specific regulation on how states may withdraw from the agreement. Article 28 provides that at any time after 3 years from the date on which this agreement has entered into force, a party may withdraw from this agreement. So a party may withdraw from the agreement, but only 3 years after the date on which the agreement entered into force for that party. The Paris Agreement, as you may know, entered into force on November 4th, 2016, for those states who had ratified it or accepted it at the time. That included the United States. The Secretary General received a communication from the permanent representative of the United States here in New York, indicating that the United States intends to exercise its right to withdraw from the agreement in accordance with Article 28, paragraph 1, at the appropriate moment.
Matthew?
You'd said to look at the website, so I am, and I just wanted to, I guess I was surprised that under recent developments it has this thing called latest registered treaties, and many of which are totally bilateral. Like there's one, the top one is Spain and Egypt cooperation to fight crime. So I wanted to know if these are really bilateral between countries, what's the significance of actually filing them with the UN? Does that make the UN some kind of a guarantor, or what? Is there any practical difference for these type of agreements being filed with the UN, and why are they filed by the UN, and how do you follow up on them? Thanks.
I cannot say how grateful I am for that question, and I wonder how many hours you have for me to answer. First of all, I'm grateful for your consulting our website. The number of hits on our website is one of our indicators in front of the Fifth Committee, so thank you for that. With regard to this aspect, I have so do it as much as you can. As far as what you are just mentioning, let me try to, first of all, distinguish two functions that we have. The treaty event is about the Secretary General being the depositary of multilateral treaties, the custodian of the original, and the recipient of instruments of accession, ratification, etc. What you're referring to is what we call the registration, and that's under Article 102 of the Charter of the United Nations. And as a matter of fact, as early as the League of Nations, we are about to have 100 years of registration. Now, after the First World War, the first one, it was considered that transparency in multilateral in treaty making, not just multilateral but also bilateral, was fundamental in order to ensure peace and security in the world. As you may know, the First World War started, among others, because of a network of secret alliances before that. So one of the ideas was that registration with, at the time, the League of Nations, later the United Nations, would serve as transparency in diplomatic relations and therefore help the objectives of the organization. That's the reason why states have the obligation under Article 102, it's not an option, it's an obligation to register treaties with the United Nations. And we have the obligation to register them and also to publish them in something called the United Nations Treaty Series. So the website does that. We receive, I have to say, around 100 to 150 treaties per month on registration. So there's a lot of treaty-making activity, and that's the rationale for this part of our work.
Just one follow-up, and I will hit refresh while I do it.
Thank you so much.
I mean, are things, some of these seem pretty kind of anodyne, but are there sort of mutual, like, defense agreements between countries? Are these, that would seem to go to peace. Are these, in your experience, being filed, or are they more sort of I don't want to say these are just formalities, but are things having to do with military cooperation filed with the UN?
Yes, I mean, all kinds of treaties are to be registered with the United Nations, and that happens. We don't know how many treaties are not registered, right? Because it's difficult for us to determine. Again, 100 to 150 treaties per month is quite considerable. It's more than 1,200 treaties per year that we receive, and these are about anything you can imagine. I remember a treaty on the repatriation of reindeers between two countries, or about the sharing of property over a piece of art. From that to the Paris Agreement on climate change, or an agreement on military matters, alliances, diplomatic relations, etc. So there's a wide spectrum of treaties concerned.
Great. All right, if there are no other questions, we're okay? Thank you very much. Santiago, thank you. And I learned something today.
Thank you very much.
But does that give the...
Maybe that's what we'll do. Just leave my stuff over there. I'll run down. Yeah, he says he likes it. This guy has got nothing to hide. Yeah. He said it'll help their budget. Yeah. More questions you guys ask. All right, so I will try to answer about there. Yeah. Be aware. Because